All right, what is up, everybody? Zombies here again. And today we are back with another episode of the Fighting Pit podcast. I am joined with my two co-hosts, Mullahoo and WizardBeast. How you guys doing today?
Reunited.
Yeah,
Yep, doing
long
good.
lost reunion. So it's good to have everyone back here, and couldn't pick a better episode to have us all be here for, because there is a lot to talk about this week. If you've been under a rock and haven't heard the news, we have had some pretty big updates and announcements and stuff for Mercenaries. So we're going to be covering all that stuff this week. Just ton of new information. This is kind of what we were hoping to see, something like this going into this new Hearthstone year. That's officially starting next Tuesday, but we got some of these changes in the patch this week, so it's been awesome. And yeah, can't wait to get right into it. Probably the biggest thing of everything we got, at least in terms of what's actually in the game now, is a huge rework of the task system and Mysterious Stranger. So if anyone hasn't heard the news, now Stranger and tasks will work differently. Basically, they made it so once you complete a task, you will automatically get the next task in the task chain for that character that goes all the way until you either max out that task at 18 or until you decide to abandon it. But this is a huge, huge change, and it's overwhelmingly been received positively, and it fixes a big issue. You know, they talked about on launch, they didn't want Stranger to be the go-to method of progression, and now it feels like it's not, and that's great. And from what I've seen, in terms of general community response, it's been very positive, and it's made a lot of people who had previously put down the game due to it requiring too much grinding feel like, hey, I can actually come back to the game and progress my stuff now without having to rely on endlessly farming 2/6 for a Mysterious Stranger. It lets them actually play the game. So really, really big change here. I'm curious what you guys think about it. I've really liked it so far. I did a little bit of farming earlier today, and then I did some farming on EU as well, and this makes me think I'll actually get, one or two competitive comps up on EU, because it's just much more realistic that I could actually farm up tasks and get coins for characters I want to use. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I started. I was very surprised that they changed this. Honestly, I
Mhm.
was not expecting. I truly thought that any kind of system change or whatever like this would have been alluded to last week. I'm really surprised that kind of like a news drop this large that also came with all the other stuff that we're going to talk about all in the same wave was really surprising to me. But I mean, this change is amazing. I think
Mhm.
this is ultimately a change that needed to happen. The
Yeah.
my only brief complaint, and again that we will talk about probably because they also address this as well, is that I still don't want to play PvE, right? Like
Mhm.
that's cool, great, and in a way, like you kind of forced yourself to make the PvE game the go hunt Mysterious Stranger game,
Mhm.
and so now that game has actually been taken away from us, which feels like it's good, it's great. I mean, ultimately, it's a good thing to have happen, but
Mhm.
we're in this weird little limbo where we don't have a good PvE system still, but the quality of life changes there. So yes, it's definitely just strictly better to get coins now. I think not having a hunt down quest like that is good. Now you can just actually go and do your content. Whether you can do all your tasks in PvP now, you can go do it in the Anixia's Lair stuff now. You can do it wherever you want instead of, like you said, just
Mhm.
going and farming Bane Hollow over and over again. So um, definitely an amazing change. Will just strictly make it easier for people, and it's not a pain in the butt to abandon a task at any point either. That doesn't feel like a huge punishment anymore if it's
Mhm.
just like, oh, I'm on task 14 with Vol'jin or whatever, I have to trigger shadow combo 800 times. And I just go, no, I don't want to. I'd
Yeah.
rather not. And so then, but now you just like wasted a whole time trying to find a stranger, blah blah. So all that gets fixed. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, overall, I think it's been great. And what I also like about this change too is it's not just for a certain type of player, it's the overall whole community.
Mhm.
Veteran players, new players, like even for you zombies who, I think you finished all of the tasks on most of the mercenaries. or
Not
right
quite there
about
yet,
there.
but getting up there. I didn't go as hard as, but I know a bunch of people who have done that and who have finished every single task. But you know what was really holding me back was I didn't feel like farming strangers for guys I'd already maxed. And so now I can do it casually. Like I got Vol'jin done today. I got Gul'dan done today. Just casually doing some PV, and you can stack your task abilities easier too. Like, so if
Mhm.
you have, two tasks that are at level 2 or 3 or whatever level, you can get them done at the same time because a lot of them have the same things, like deal heroic damage or deal damage to fighters or protectors or whatever it is. And so it makes that a lot easier, which is just awesome.
No, that's actually pretty cool. I didn't think about that. That like you're actually almost incentivized to run task tracks like identically.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually pretty cool. That's a pretty good point.
Yeah. So overall, I think it's just been, like we were saying, amazing change because, even especially when new mercenaries come out, it's just gonna be easy. You can just get their
Mm-hmm.
one thing and then just run through it instead of having to wait to, oh, mysterious stranger, come on, let's roll it today. Where, oh, once you get the first one, if you do, or if it pops up on the daily, you're good to go. You can hold it on to that for a week if you want to. So you're like, you know what, I want to do 5 tasks for this new one today. Oh, then tomorrow I'll do another 5. You don't
Mhm.
have to worry about like getting the next one over and over again. So it's just nice, especially for when new mercenaries will come out.
Definitely.
Y-
Like that's a good point, and I think that's why it's also, even a benefit to those who have already finished all the tasks and stuff. For current mercs is, we're going to be getting a new merc here shortly, and it's going to be way, way easier. Like I'm going to be tracking my progress on that and seeing how long it takes. But I can guarantee you the fact that I don't have to go out of my way to hunt every one of his 18 tasks is probably going to cut that time in like half or
Oh yeah.
something like that, which is huge.
Actual huge percentage
Huge
probably.
difference. It really lower. This is one of the big things we've been advocating for is lowering the barrier to entry for PvP, and obviously this isn't a instant fix or fix everything about the grinding time, but it does help hugely because once you get a merc to their 18th task, usually that is about enough coins to max out either all their regular skills or their like 2 most important and then their best item. And
Mhm.
that's really, I mean, obviously getting everything maxed is great for, fringe situations and that little bit of extra stats. But if you just want to get a character in PvP and try him out, like doing up to task 18 will pretty much do it for you. It'll get you most of the way there. I still think there's a little bit more work to be done there. And they did mention when they announced this change that this is not the only change to the task system that is coming. This is just the one that launched in the current patch. Apparently, there is going to be another change to something with how tasks work later on in the year. I imagine, just taking a guess here, and we'll talk about some speculation at the end for our end question, but my guess as to what this is kind of alluding to is right now, once you finish task 18, you're either going to farm 1-1 or you're going to a bounty where those coins happen to show up for that character. And I think that experience could definitely still be made better. So I think that is probably the thing they're going to want to address next. I mean, that could also be addressed with the endgame stuff, which was also mentioned very vaguely that that's going to be
Mhm.
coming too. But I think that's more going to be for your characters who are already maxed out or close to max rather than like getting coins for new guys. So I think that's one thing they could definitely also improve in the future is giving us some way to target coin farm that's not
Mhm.
1-1, right?
And I think that
And
would be. Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I think that'd be really good to have, a farm that's, for every mercenary that's different than the same farm. They kind of
Yeah.
did that with, this change on Mysterious Stranger. Not everyone's gonna be constantly doing Fellwood anymore,
Hmm.
for the farming. Now, if you want to get coins for that mercenary, you have all their tasks already, so just run through whichever one that you actually want to farm for that bounty. Now you don't have to worry about even in that bounty rolling the mysterious stranger and always taking that path. So if you're going for, coins on the new mercenary, you can just go however you want to the boss now too. Because a lot of people on all these new bounties always went for the mysterious stranger
Yep.
because it's a higher chance on that, but now you don't have to. You can actually look for the best path possible now.
That's true. Yeah, it's a very big change, and one I've noticed myself. Like now, when I'm doing PVE, like I've been doing some of the Veil of Straws bounty because it has some of the Murky coins available already. We'll talk about him in just a minute, but I was doing that bounty, and I found myself I'm not taking the path to that mystery coin node every time. Like I'm going different routes and stuff, and I think that is just a better thing to have available. Or like I like not feeling forced into having to go one route. I like that ability to be like, oh, I can go this other way to get a boon or a resurrection or whatever, or just an extra treasure by not skipping a node. Because now, with strangers showing up less, those mystery nodes are a bit more negative more often. You can still get, free trip to the boss, and sometimes, the potato can be a double-edged sword. It can be helpful, it can be hurtful. But overall, really like the change. And you can still get strangers, and you can still farm for strangers. However, the rate is slightly smaller. I haven't done extensive testing on it, but I've talked to a bunch of people who've played quite a bit since the patch, and the general consensus seems to be that it's been nerfed by about half. So instead of showing up one every 1 out of 2 runs, so 50%, I think it's more like 25%. I've still gotten a handful of them already without even aiming to farm them. So they do still show up. So it's really, I don't think it's terrible or anything. But a little weird to reduce their rate, but I guess it makes sense. I mean, the change more than compensates for it, in my opinion. So
yeah. I mean, technically, you almost don't want to be. In many cases now, you literally don't want it to be Mysterious Stranger. Like if you are going to if you're going to the node, you are either going there to begin your quest chain, and you really really want to go there, which is represented by going to hunt it down. But now most of the time, people will have a full task board. All the time, literally almost all the time. And so now Mysterious Strangers are actually bad value. You'll get your 15 coins or whatever, but if anything, it has a weighted perception now and when it's good. And like you were saying, it does feel cool. Like what WizardBeast was saying, the play pattern for any established player in this game when looking at a PvE board was, okay, where's a mysterious note? Where's the mysterious stranger maybe hiding? Ignore literally everything else. I am not going to look at a single other node on this entire board because that's where I'm going. I don't care how hard it is. That's where I'm going because I'm trolling if I'm not. And that's just not an experience that the devs wanted, that the boards wanted, that any of the different little fights and the elite timings being here and there we just bulldozed through an important way that the game is supposed to be played. We just kind of cheated it because the numbers were what they were.
Yeah, that's true. And so that is overall great change. We're happy to see it, and happy to see that it is bringing back a lot of people to the mode who felt, it was just unenjoyable or took too long to do the kind of grinding to get their characters up. Now it doesn't feel quite as bad. It feels a lot more reasonable, and that
first systems change really ever in that sense of this is the only thing that could have possibly qualified for what we've been kind of asking for various forms of. This is finally the beginning of that.
Hopefully. Definitely. I mean, yeah, that's how I feel too. And that wasn't the only change we got. We got a ton of buffs. We'll talk about those a little more when we dive into the meta stuff. And we did also have our first nerf/rework in Varden. So that is really interesting. Pretty surprised which character they decided to hit and how they decided to do it. But we'll save that for a little bit later. Do want to mention we are getting a new mercenary next week, though. This one is going to be free for everybody. And it's going to be a Murky the Murloc. I guess he was big in Heroes of the Storm, right? From what I've heard.
Yeah, apparently.
Pretty cool there. I know WizardBeast is a big fan of him. So I figured we'd just run over, what he does a little bit, and maybe some kind of brief thoughts about it. This will be free for everyone in the Tavern Pass, dropping on Tuesday. So that's pretty sweet. Kind of like they did with Vanessa, and you can already get his coins right now, either through packs, random rewards, or going to the Veil of Straws Blackrock Mountain Bounty, and you can farm them there. Been doing a little bit of that myself, kind of prepare for next week. But do you want to read them off, WizardBeast, since you're our resident Murky fan?
Yep, I'll go for it. Murky, the best Murloc, is an epic green fighter. His stats are 1179, and these are maxed. First ability is Slime Time. It is a nature ability. At 4 speed, deal 12 damage to an enemy, and give it taunt until the end of next turn. So you can hit it, has taunt this turn, and until the end of next turn. So, that's a new thing we haven't seen. First mercenary to do that. Second ability, Bubbly Bobble, 5, also an nature ability. Speed 4, cooldown 1, restore 13 health to an adjacent Murloc, and then swap places and both gain Divine Shield. And also has nature combo repeat this. So, and just to clarify, I'm pretty sure because I was reading all the text with Long Shin, when you swap places, it's not like Long Shin where the targets swap.
Oh, okay.
So on Long Shin's abilities, in game and on the previous patch notes, it did say targets swap if possible, and nowhere I've seen from Murky does it say this. So we don't know for sure. We will have to test it in game. But so far, it seems like just the places swap and Divine Shield and heal, but no targets will swap so far. And then his third ability is Pufferfish 5, speed 7, cooldown 1, and it's a Murloc that is summoned with 15 attack and 10 health, and it has a death rattle. Deal damage equal to this minion's attack to 3 random enemies.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's basically kind of like one of Cookie's fish, but that you're summoning for yourself, and then also, which is good, is a Murloc too, instead of a beast like Cookie's fish.
True.
And then for equipment, first equipment is Time to Krill. 4, passive, whenever a friendly Murloc attacks an enemy with taunt, give them +4 attack. So it's a permanent +4 stacking attack. Second equipment, Slippery when wet. 4, passive, after one of your characters loses Divine Shield or Frozen, its next ability is 3 speed faster. So a little bit of a counter to being frozen there. So if they're frozen one turn, the next following turn they'll have 3 speed faster. So it kind of helps out against some frost there. And the last equipment, March of the Murlocs, 4, Battlecry summon 2 10/10 Murlocs. So just straight up put more guys on your board, and it's great also having them as Murlocs. So definitely pretty good Murloc, I would say, for coming in.
Yeah. No, he has some very interesting abilities. I really like that he has summoned 2 Murlocs. I think that's kind of, what Murlocs are known for is just, having a whole lot of them. And so far, the Murlocs we have, we have some with summons and stuff, but the summons haven't really seen too much play. So it would be pretty cool to see Murky bring the Murlocs into a bit more relevancy. I'm not sure if he's going to do that on his own or if he's just going to find space in like other comps or if he can just synergize enough with himself with some of these abilities where you don't even have to necessarily do Murloc Tribal. I think we will see some Murloc Tribal builds, but everyone has talked about it at this point. Murlocs really feel like they're missing a red. Like what Belinda was to green and fire is what we need in like Murloc for a red unit. As we have some decent blue Murlocs. We have, I think Murkai is actually a very powerful, probably the most powerful Merc we have other than Murlocs, other than Cookie. But I used him a little bit early on, and he feels like he might be busted if we get some good Murloc support. And seeing that Sir Finley's in the set, I'm like positive we're gonna get a Sir Finley Murloc at some point. It just seems like we've noticed a trend so far where they do try and link up the expansion and the themes of the release. The only thing that kind of broke from that was the Lunar New Year Mercenaries event, but everything else has been pretty on theme with what they're currently doing with the game. So I'm excited to see how Murky ends up doing. He will be available for free next week, so be sure to grab him, and he will be available for quite some time as it lasts the whole duration of the Tavern Pass. So like I just made a free-to-play EU account, and I was still able to just snag Vanessa real quick. So definitely do that if you haven't already and you think you might want Vanessa in the future. Definitely grab her before Tuesday, as then she won't be available for free there anymore.
She just got buffed.
Yeah, and she did. I don't know if she's going to see any play, but some of the other pirates got buffed too, and they were actually kind of fringe playable, and now they might be even better. So very excited for that. We are going to talk about all that meta stuff. Before we do, though, I do want to talk a little bit about something that was announced at the same time as, the Stranger announcement and kind of giving an idea of what to expect for the rest of the year. They did mention that they're going to be changing up how Mercenaries release. So before, the way releases were done is we would get a drop pretty much every month since the game dropped last October. The time between them was usually, it varied a little bit, but it was usually about a month in between drops. And personally, I liked that kind of speed of things. The main reason I liked it was because I did feel it was allowing the meta to evolve at a pretty healthy pace. I do think they could have slowed it down ever so slightly to give people a little bit more time. So maybe like a month and a half or something. But personally, I was a fan of it. I know many people were not as big a fan of the speed of releases because a lot of people felt like, just by the time they got like a few of the new characters done, more characters were already dropping, and it made it feel difficult to keep up sometimes. And I think this is in part a response to those feelings. This also does help with an issue that was occurring with packs, right? Because you get 5 new mercenaries on average, and that, if you have a lot of your mercenaries maxed, packs are really bad for you because you get a lot of useless excess coins. And so there only being 5 new mercs at a time, the odds of you getting coins for them was rather low, unfortunately. Well, now they're changing the release cycle for big mercenaries drops. Instead of dropping 5 a month every month, or whatever the number they want to settle on, they're going to be doing it in the 0.4 patches for patch cycles. So 0.4 is usually the mini set. That usually comes a month and a half, 2 months after the main expansion. So we're getting the main expansion next week in April. So I'd imagine we'll probably get that 0.4 patch at the end of May or early June. But they're going to be changing it so it's going to be big mercenaries drops, and they even specify, the next bunch of mercenaries, and we do mean bunch. So it sounds like we're going to be getting a lot of them. Given that this would mean only 3 major big merc drops a year, I do think they might ramp it up a little in terms of how many they're dropping. Because if we think about it, right, 4 months of mercenaries 3 times a year, that would have been 20 mercs, right? So I think we're going to probably get, just instead of getting those every month, we're going to get them all at once. And maybe there's more than that, but I think they're going to be at least 20. And that's a ton. And that kind of fixes, not perfectly, and I still wish they would offer some kind of duplicate protection or dust system or whatever. But this will make packs a little bit better, because if you have a chance of getting 20 new mercs, that gives you way better odds of getting coins for someone you don't have. Whereas if you're just going for 5 at a time, it also gives people more time to farm up their tasks and generate packs and stuff for these releases. So in that respect, I think it's a good change. Also worth noting, it doesn't just mean we're only going to be getting Mercenaries content every 0.4 patch. They do mention specifically Mercenaries will continue to have updates like events, balance changes, bug fixes, and general improvements in every patch. So that was very important to see for me. Obviously, we haven't gotten a lot of that outside of the events in the first 6 months. And they do also mention that part of the reason for these changes is to allow the team to have more time to focus on aspects of the game the community cares about. So a little vague with that, but personally, what I'm hoping for with what they're saying here and what I think needs to happen with them changing how this works is I think if you're going to do the big drops, kind of like Hearthstone expansions, where it's like 3 times a year, but they're really big ones, I do think you 100% have to actively balance more, because if we had to deal with the last meta we had for 3 or 4 months, I don't think a lot of people would fully stick around for it. It's just, and we've seen that, right, with like what happens in like standard and other formats, where it's like people get kind of sick of stuff and then they wait for the nerfs and all that. I think if they're going to be doing like this, they have to take a more proactive approach at both buffing and nerfing characters. They're already showing us that's something they're willing to do with the buffs we got in this patch. So I think it's definitely possible. And I'm hoping that that's kind of the trade-off we see, is that part of the reason they want to do it all at once is so they can work on other things, because there are a lot of bugs that still need fixing. There are, in my opinion, some characters that still need to be balanced. And there are a ton of characters that could be buffed, like some of the ones we saw and we're going to talk about soon, to just not, you don't even have to implement new characters to change the meta and change the game. You can just throw a couple buffs on some of these launch characters that see no play. And as we've seen in the last 2 days, it can really change the meta like overnight. So I think that's a resource that was kind of underutilized in these first 6 months. And I'm hoping it's something that we'll start to see more of now.
Yeah, I think we're definitely in their perfect world. I think the meta solves itself enough that maybe they think that they can get away with actually not really nerfing and buffing things too much. Because even if we get 20 mercs at once, it's still gonna take. We're gonna see the play patterns and like meta development patterns that we see now theoretically stretched out like over a wicked long period of time, because already we're like, we like literally the 3 of us might be pushing one narrative about one archetype or whatever, and people will start playing it or thinking about it, hearing about it, then starting to look into it, then grinding their guys for it,
Mhm.
then trying to play it, and then getting good with it, and then it's 2 months later, right? Like that is already really common with just one arc, like with just dragons or with just frost or with whatever. Forget everything, just goes out the window when we suddenly get 20 mercs at once, and
Mhm.
Europe is randomly testing these 3 mercs more than these other, like NA. Like literally, we could get these huge regional differences, and who knows what. So I wouldn't be surprised that they're almost leery of banning, or not banning, but like nerfing and buffing things too much, because they're going to say like, look, you guys are literally have too many things to still figure out and test. Like, we're not going to touch anything. Just rock it. You have 20 mercs, right? It is in that Pokemon sense. They're kind of forcing us to break our perception about the fact that you can max everybody, that you can get them all at once. Like, this to me seems kind of more like a double down on that. Choose your starter, right? Instead of just choose it from 4 or 5, like choose from 20. Pick like an archetype that is going to be your starter, and then you can start 3 of their quests chains, their task chains at once, and then you can start playing that deck and figure it out while someone else tries a completely different deck that's also brand new. I kind of like this like forced letting go of the hand holding of like players wanting to get everything. This kind of makes you not get everything, which I kind of like.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I have to agree.
that's a decent point, right? And people, there still will be those of us still who
All right, and
go
they
for
will,
everything,
and they
right?
can, yeah.
But it will take a bit longer,
that will
and
be doable.
you're definitely right about that. Like, we've seen it now. Usually takes like a week or something when people go really hard to have some of the new guys maxed and already. And now, I mean, the same will probably still be true, but instead of maxing most of them, you'll have done like, I don't know, like a quarter of them or whatever it is, right? And I think you're right. That will make it take longer for the meta to fully develop. So I don't think you'll need to be doing patches all the time, but I do think maybe like kind of the in between, right? Like maybe a month after, 2 months after, when we have that like middle ground point. And worth mentioning, they did say events are still coming, and I imagine that I don't know what else they would give us with events if not a new mercenary. I think that's another way to help keep things a little fresh. Like they're not overloading
One
us
mercenary
with
weapon
new
event.
mercenaries because we'll already have so many, but they'll give us something to do in PvE, and then they'll give us a new character who will, maybe spice up an underutilized archetype or change the meta or whatever. And we've all seen how much, I mean, especially from this buff patch, we've all seen how just one good character can completely flip the whole game on its head if it's strong enough.
Yeah, and the one thing I like about this though too is I think with having the mercenaries kind of spread out a little bit more and how you said before is they will be doing more bound changes is they can kind of fine tune I think some mercenaries now and start to maybe equalize more of the mercenaries across the board. If the meta's kind of stagnant or something and they do bounce change, all of a sudden, bunch of mercenaries from launch come back up with a bunch of buffs. We see Trigor just came
Mm-hmm.
up. He's been out for a little while, wasn't a starting mercenary, but he's been out for a long time, and this one buff and shot him up, and like everyone seems to be playing him. So I think having this kind of downtime on, hey, we don't have to rush out this mercenary in the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Now we
Mm-hmm.
have, hey, we have 4 months. So I think it will be a little nice to have potential for mercenaries that we don't see too often now.
Yeah, I think buffs are definitely, obviously, there are only so many times you can buff characters, right? Eventually you're going to run out of characters to buff, or it also runs the risk of over buffing, right? Like, I think
Well,
most people can agree
honestly,
Grom buff was scary, right? Like, it worked out. It wasn't like the craziest thing in the world, but we were talking about this before we started the show. Imagine a world where Grom never got buffed. Like,
yeah,
it would just have these ripple effects on all the different metagames we've had
all the hero stuff,
currently,
yeah.
right? Like GVT never would have existed, and that would have changed everything about the format like a couple months ago. So you can overbuff, but so far, and I'm sure there's some people who would argue Trigor was an overbuff. I think it's still too early to say exactly, but this is what I want to see because they're taking characters that I've already put time and effort into grinding up, and they're making them usable. It's like basically like we just got a bunch of new characters because none of these characters were really usable in PvP before. Or their usage was so fringe, especially relative to the powerful stuff, it just didn't work. So I think they have to be a little careful with it, but I think it's a great direction to go in because I want more of my characters to be useful, right, rather than just sitting there collecting dust.
No,
Mhm.
definitely. And I think the VAR, like in speaking of saying like, oh, you can accidentally like overbuff things the wrong way. Like you technically, if you just keep buffing everything so that it's all at a good level, or like you print a new Merc and it gets power crept up in a way that it makes someone else bad, but you buff it, blah blah blah. Um, was something I think that's actually pretty unique to Mercenaries that is a cool little loophole is that, and we're kind of seeing it in Varden to kind of semi shortcut to something I'm sure we'll talk about a lot more, is that what you can actually do in Mercenaries that you can't do in something like Standard is since all of these characters tend to have multiple identities, you can literally buff a nerf into a character and vice versa. And so you can actually like take a character like Varden, for example, that just froze everything guaranteed for a flat amount of damage. It all slowed them. Now, Varden shoots 3 random missiles. It does more damage. You can high roll on one character and it's simultaneously a buff and a nerf, and you can actually do that and rotate that like power point on each different merc between different equipment and different abilities to theoretically never have to overbuff something. You can just at any point make crush be terrify spec for like 2 months or something, or like if he's too good with, or like right, you can take cold snap and nerf. They could have just nerfed cold snap, or they could change the way that flare worked, or they could change the way that ice lance worked, or they could like there's a bunch of different ways that you could literally like shift around the power levels
Mm-hmm.
within Mercenaries that I think is actually pretty sweet. And they're kind of showing us as a precedent to not ever call it a nerf, but to nerf things incidentally through either printing another mercenary that does a similar thing, another mercenary that buffing a mercenary that counters them, or just changing where the words are on a single merc. Not even like making them worse or better,
Mm-hmm.
just where are they? What do they do? Not and that in itself, like you said, you change the wording on backlash on Trigor, literally just the wording. The numbers are still basically the same. They might as well be the same. But you change a couple literal just pieces of grammar and the character is way, 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 way better. So again, I think these are like funky game specific precedents that Mercenaries has that are yet to be fully explored, but in my mind are good frameworks to be able to work in.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think being able to rework a character and making that decision is a good tool to have in the toolbox, right? I think,
Mhm.
like you said, Mercs is in kind of a unique thing because there's so much more you can tweak about a character than in standard, right? Like if a card's overperforming or overpowered in standard, you're kind of limited in what you can do with it, right? You can increase its mana cost, which is known to, usually have an effect of making the card less powerful and show up less, or you can alter the text in some way. But those are really it. Those are the options you have. And in Mercenaries, there's so many different aspects about the abilities you can change. And like we've seen with Varden, you can even change how the ability works entirely in ways. Like you could alter the numbers, but instead of doing that, you could just totally change how the text works. So I figured we'll go over the Varden change to start it off here because that is the biggest precedent. So what they did with Varden, and they consider this a rework, like Mullahoo said, no mention of the word nerf, because it's not strictly speaking a nerf.
No.
In some instances, it's better. In some instances, it's worse. I do wonder if this is also them saying, hey, the Frost kind of tribe so far, we saw that more random damage with local art. Is Frost going to be more about that, a lot of power and a lot of synergy, but you can't direct it, target it quite as much? That could be an interesting direction to take with it. But yeah, so what they did with Varden, they changed Flurry. So before, Flurry used to deal 6 damage to 3 random enemy Mercs and make them each 2 slower next turn. Now it is shoot 3 missiles at random enemies, and that's an important word change because now it can hit tokens and summons and all that stuff, not just enemy mercenaries, whereas before it couldn't hit those units. That deals 7 damage each and slow for 2 next turn. So instead of slowing everything, whatever gets hit gets slowed for that too. And you only get to hit 3 things. So that's a huge change because you can't plan to slow everything, or you can't account for knowing what your opponent's speed is going to be the next turn, or even knowing exactly what health they're going to be at, right? Because, all 3 of those missiles could go into Trigor and then Trigor dies, or they could hit next to him and it could be disastrous. So it's it definitely knocks down some of the consistency on the character, which I think is a good thing because I think Varden was a bit too consistent with what they were doing. Another thing they changed was an equipment. So the Chilling Amulet equipment, that is the Death Rattle equipment. Before, it would deal 8 damage to all enemies and freeze a random enemy until the end of next turn. Now it got a boost in damage, deals 14 damage to all enemies, which is quite a bit, and that is critting for 28, so that's a pretty significant increase there, but it freezes a random enemy not until the end of next turn. So if that unit already went off, the freeze wears off at end of turn. If they haven't, they get frozen and they can't act, but that is a pretty substantial nerf to how that works. But generally, I think that was a good thing. We've seen we know at this point, one of the most powerful things you can do in Mercenaries is locking a unit out for a turn. And sometimes with the old wording, this would literally lock out a unit for 2 turns, which is just absolutely backbreaking a lot of the time. So I think removing that is probably a good thing for a more enjoyable play experience because this wasn't something you could like easily play around. Like the Lich King has a taunt that does that too, right? But you can play around that. Whereas the only way to play around Varden was to not kill the Varden, which is like not the greatest design, right? So I think this was a good change. It's weird to me that they opted to go for Flurry and the equipment over Cold Snap. I really would have liked to see Cold Snap go to 2, or like swap it so you can freeze at 1 speed or whatever, and then Cold Snap's on 2, because I think Snap is a bit more of the degenerate ability, but again, that's mainly because it's sped up a lot of the time. When it's going off at 6 speed, Snap's pretty fair, in my opinion. So maybe they just thought, we'll see how this change goes. It'll make it harder for people to set up consistent snaps, right? Because you can't start doing that math from turn 1, knowing everything's going to take the damage and line up. So interesting. Not what I expected. I don't think any of us expected a change like this. And that was the only kind of nerf change. All the other ones were buffs. Kind of surprised not to see anything to any other characters, particularly Valera and Localar. But this is kind of their first time doing this in terms of like a big range of buffs and a rework. Because last time it was just buffs, and I'm pretty sure those buffs were changes that were kind of reverted last minute from like the pre-launch, so they didn't have to put any extra work into those buffs, whereas these ones they probably did. So really interesting. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about the Varden change, though. I think it took us all by surprise.
Overall, I think so far I'm actually liking it better because it kind of helped with two areas. One, blend of frost with the snap, because now, you know, they would always also slow all three of your guys
Mm-hmm.
by 2 for the next turn and be faster. Where now, it could be a little random. So I've seen it's actually been a little bit better in that stance. And then also I do like that it can hit
The summons.
all enemies. Yeah, the summons. So now things like, say, Kazakus, you can summon a 20 golem, and that could take all 3 hits.
Or those
So
the little golems, they can protect themselves, absorb a hit, absorb a second one. Like it's it's pretty big.
yeah, I've liked it, and also surprisingly, I've seen his other equipment that no one else has seen is Flurry doing more damage now. I've actually seen people
Oh,
running
really?
that equipment. Yeah, because
Interesting.
even though the chilling amulet does more damage, it's still he has to die. So if people
Mm-hmm.
aren't focusing him as much, might as well have the extra 4 damage on Flurry. So now it's 11 3 times. That's 33 damage without any crits, and then
Yeah.
slows on top of it. So I've actually seen some frost comps running, and it's been pretty good so far. So
Interesting.
yeah, I think overall I'll have to see. That's only been a couple days since all of this has happened, but
Mm-hmm.
so far I'm kind of liking it. Not, it's not like, oh, they just another broken thing, because
Mm-hmm.
at least with some RNG in there, it can be bad and it can be good.
Yeah. Definitely, it adds makes it less consistent, which I think is part of the problem with Frost. It's like you'd open into Frost and you're like, all right, I know how the next 3 turns of the game are going, and I know that turn 2 is often going to involve me not pressing any buttons, and so that's a I do think it can be frustrating sometimes, like when they high roll on it, it's frustrating. Like I ran into a few Vardens that definitely high rolled me, and especially in the Trigor matchups and stuff, because whether they hit the Trigor or your other stuff changes so much of the game. So it can be a little frustrating in that regard, and I hope we don't see like I'm okay with randomness. And I think it can be useful, but I don't want to see like a critical mass of it in the same tribe. So like I think it's fine with what we have now, but like don't give me like another random Frost character. Like I mean, don't give me any more Frost characters, but
Just stop there. Yeah.
but just don't overdo it. Is I guess what I'm saying. At least within the same tribe, right? I think randomness can add a lot of positive things to the game, and like one of my favorite abilities, the Leroy one, is a ton of randomness, right? But you just have to be a little careful with it.
I have a couple of various thoughts about this, only because I've played basically the one deck that I've played almost exclusively these last series of months or whatever has been the Varden, the Varden Tyrion Local R opener deck that's been super duper fun.
Yep.
So this is from a slightly different perspective, but I feel like I might have played the most Varden in a not like cold snap Varden deck of any of us potentially. And these changes, I have played some games with them, and these changes say a number of things, and I'll even start with what you were saying of don't put all of this randomness effect into the same tribe. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised that they are explicitly doubling down and saying the ice storm, hailstorm effect, right, is actually a frost flavored effect. That they might actually be saying that no, this is all kind of going into Frost, right? Like that this is actually going to be a local R thing, a Varden thing, and then if we get another inevitable Frost character at some point, might have another effect like this that they do kind of like. Basically, they're also all trying to get almost every single Merc ability that is if it shoots a bunch of different missiles it seems like they're kind of trying to get them all to be all those missiles are random,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's Uther to Millhouse to
True.
Localar to Varden. There, if anything, I don't. Maybe I'm already backing up on what I was saying before, right? Is that it's not necessarily a frost thing; it's a multiple missiles thing, and that all abilities with multiple missiles might get slowly more geared towards this. And so I wouldn't be surprised. But the randomness is annoying. One thing that I've actually come up with a lot that is something that people don't really talk about very much is that the UI on this game on mobile is kind of a disaster. I can't tell you how many times I've clicked on a character and wanted to see if my Varden slowed them, and I literally can't. The
Yeah.
text bar is off of my video game screen. There is nothing that I can do to figure it out. And that's one of the biggest downsides in my mind of things like randomness like this that apply status effects randomly, is that at least with Varden, I could know mental math wise, look at the board. I have a Varden. I can go, okay, they're all slowed by 2. That, like, saving the mental math of that is enormous. And the thing that I'm most triggered by when it comes to Varden's randomness change is that randomness with pure damage, I think, is fine because you can just look at the screenshot of the effect after it's done and understand what happened. But with this, you can't. And that's really annoying. Odd accessibility, like UI thing like that. So that's kind of frustrating, I think. But otherwise, I think it sucks that Varden does kind of become less consistent and you almost certainly don't take this equipment anymore. I do think, like WizardBeast was saying, the straight plus flurry damage now is probably better. It was already getting very, very close because no one could afford to kill Varden, right? Like, people were literally just not attacking Varden because it was just a waste of damage. It was just, you had a Localar that was scarier or a Jaina that was scarier. You actively paired Varden with scarier threats, so if they killed their Varden, they were throwing. And so you almost cut yourself by playing a death rattle equipment when you didn't need it. So the fact that it could double freeze things was the biggest tiebreaker, and so you would just say, "Oh, this will just crush you later, and we'll play through it." So I at the end of the day, I think I like these changes. I think it's the nerf that it needed. However, it doesn't affect the toxicity of Cold Snap, and Valera is unchanged. And I think that at the end of the day means that Varden is still good, but you have to think about it. You can't just throw it into whatever deck you want anymore. I'm really kind of curious to try it out with Localar and other stuff. Is it now more of a combo card with Valera and like less of a frost card that matters? Is it more of a mid-rangey card where you're actually okay with saying, like, playing it in my deck with the Tyrion and the Localar and you're just like vibing and you're going through pure damage, like you are just treating him as a damage bot with just do 11 3 times, maybe more, run it, and that might be good enough. So lots of change with this character, and again, like we said, with no Valera nerf, with no Localar nerf, with no Jaina nerf, this is the only thing that attacks Frost, but they buffed some Localar variants like Trigor and Varian Rin that are kind of also trying to be red characters that can beat up on fighters. So maybe Localar stocks fall down a little bit. Again, Valera also got targeted with some anti-stealth stuff. And again, these reds that are good, and Varden getting slightly nerfed. So I don't mind that there weren't other nerfs, but this Varden change, a lot of stuff comes with it, and there's a lot of sneaky information hiding inside it, which is cool.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I didn't even think about the mobile stuff because most of the time when I'm playing PvP, at least, I'm usually doing it on PC, especially with the deck tracker. And I've definitely said since day one, they like need to copy deck tracker's homework on the UI for PvP. There needs to be an easy way for you to just look at the board and see, hey, these are what the opponent's abilities are, and this is how much they're slowed by if I slowed them. There's so much to keep track of in Mercenaries that I can totally understand, like, and I've had it happen to me multiple times on stream where it's like I'll look away or I'll look over at chat for a second, I'll look back and I'm like, what just happened? And even on PC, it gets annoying because sometimes you go to that sidebar to see what happened during the turn, and you can't scroll that. So it's like you miss all the stuff that happened at the beginning, even on there. But the fact that you can't see between, because there are a lot of, buffs and debuffs and all this other stuff that stack as like enchantments on the character. So I can totally see that getting too long for the mobile UI to read. And that's definitely a problem. And I think really the big answer to that would be just implementing effectively what Deck Tracker does, where you show the 3 little orbs and it shows like the little abilities just as kind of a reminder of like, hey, this is what the character's ability is. And if you tap them, you could see more details. Like, that would be a great way to do it. It might be kind of hard to fit all that in the mobile UI. I'm not too sure, but it really, like, I consider it like a core part of the game for playing PvP, and it's why I very seldom play PvP on my phone, because I want to have that experience, because there's so much stuff you have to keep track of and math to do and all this stuff in Mercenaries that's like, I don't want to have to be manually keeping track of how much slower did I make this character last turn. So would definitely like to see a change there, but we'll have to wait and see. I think that's a bigger UI thing, but I think it could come eventually, especially if this change does bring more people back to the game. Kind of interesting thing about the Varden change, I was using Varden quite a bunch too, because I copied your opener and I changed the backline a little bit for like a Leroy deck, and I was really liking it. I played some games with it after the patch, and it still felt good, but it definitely there was definitely a lack of consistency there for sure, and I could definitely see the argument for running more damage on the Varden with the equipment. I think Varden's still going to be very good in the Valera openers. I haven't seen a ton of them, but you still see them every once in a while. Valera, Varden, Belinda, freeze you with the elemental, scale up with the Varden. It's still good. Varden getting nerfed didn't really change that a whole ton. However, I have seen Varden in pure Frost openers, and I feel like I've actually seen more non-Valera Frost decks actually since this change, where it'll be Jaina.
Yeah, you got too many scary red guys right now for Valera potentially.
Yeah, that does seem to have had an impact on Valera's appearance, because you still see some Valera decks, but they are not every other comp like they were before, or at least that hasn't been my experience. Like, I've seen more dedicated Frost, so like Jaina Localar Varden or Jaina Varden Belinda. And it's interesting because Frost plays very differently when they're not acting at super fast speeds. It's still really good, but it plays differently. And overall, I've really liked the changes that have happened. Now, we did mention Valera didn't get directly nerfed, right? But there was kind of a nod to the fact that Valera is so ridiculous with stealth, in that they gave a bunch of like random characters just tacked on, they lose stealth with some of these abilities. So I'll run through them quickly here, see if I can get them all. But there were quite a few characters they just threw on the text, remove stealth, and that felt like the nod to like, okay, Valera stealth is a little ridiculous. You know, the fact that sometimes it's literally the best move to just sit there and stealth and do nothing and just get the passive bonus is just ridiculous. So this felt kind of like a nod towards that. So Millhouse got one, which strange, but okay. His arcane powder equipment, it deals 1 more damage, so from 4 to 5, and enemies lose stealth. So boom, AoE, remove stealth. A lot of these are AoE effects, worth noting, or some kind of effect in that similar realm. We got Thrall, actually. Thrall's Lightning Storm will now remove stealth. In one of the weirder changes, what's his name? Manaroth. This isn't going to make Manaroth see play, by the way, but before, reduce the attack of all enemies by 15. Now, reduced by 15, and they lose stealth. And the one that really surprised me the most was Ragnaros. So Ragnaros' Die Insect now removes stealth. So if you high roll and hit the Valera for a bunch of damage, now you double high roll and get rid of the stealth. And I think Voon is the last one that does that. So Voon's Axe Throw got a little bit more damage from 8 to 10, and now when whatever gets hit by that, removes stealth. So out of all those ones, I do think Rag and Voon are the most impactful, because those characters were already seeing play and already in some good comps. So the fact that they can kind of say no Valera speed for you is a good thing. But it doesn't, I don't even consider this like a nerf to Valera though, because it's very fringe, and a lot of the time you can just redeploy stealth quickly on the next turn. Because
and
a lot of
you can't queue up your ability, like especially when Mercenaries has this pseudo nerf where like you can't even choose to attack a you can't queue up an attack onto a stealth Merc. So even if you Manaroth Scream and take them out of stealth, you couldn't shoot them.
Yeah.
What does it do? It doesn't do anything. Sure, they come out of stealth, and the rest of their abilities slow down. And like, so at least that's something. Like the ones that are a little bit faster, like Manaroth's Howl of Terror and like Lightning Storm on Thrall. Who cares? You're dealing tickling. It's, I guess technically it's critting Valeera in that sense, but it's not actually meaningfully impacting the turn. So it does feel weird. I think honestly, it feels to me more like less of a Valeera targeting thing, potentially a nod to a future character, by the way.
Could be.
That's maybe more likely than anything, is that there could be another stealthing character that comes up, especially a stealth character that goes underwater for some reason as their means of stealth with the underwater set, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's honestly, to me, it just screams a little bit more of kind of like having that like immersion continuity connection to WoW, where there are certain abilities that like you would proc stealth on targets that you didn't even mean to hit their stealth off of when you would in WoW PvP and things like that nature. Like the priest, basically like the Manaroth ability is like a priest ability where you would just do like an AoE scream, and if there was a rogue that was stealth next to you, it would break their stealth and they would start running around in fear. And same thing with things like the Millhouse thing is more from like a flash of light that you're revealing the, like, it's like a what's it called? What's the actual equipment called? It's
yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't used Manaroth enough.
Arcane powder, right? So it's
that one. Yeah.
So like it pops and it has this flash of light, and that's why you can see things. Same thing with like Lightning Storm. It's like an AoE. It hits things that are stealth and it lights up the area so you can see them. So it's almost like a weird immersion thing more than a Valeera thing, I think.
Like lore. Yeah,
literally more than anything. And so maybe it is more so tending to that as well as future upcoming character than Valeera itself. But you're right. I think these stealth changes don't really affect Valeera whatsoever. If anything, the Trigor buff and the Varian Rin buff are the real hateful directions that are pointed at Valeera, with the retaliation from Varian getting juiced up, and then now Trigor just being all over the place.
Definitely. And I do want to mention some other characters here before we get to kind of the meat of the buffs here. I do want to mention some of the characters who got buffs that were okay or weird, but kind of inconsequential. So just going to like rapid fire. Baron Geddon got some extra stats, 4 more health, so 82 to 86. Also buffed one of his equipments for unplayable equipment. Heating up went from 4 to 7 more damage. Cool. Nobody's going to use that.
The only thing I will say about that is it actually is good against Trigor because you don't want to do the AoE. So fire comp with using that and Antonitis and Rag, I think actually kills Trigor.
Really?
If you have that equipment. I would have to calculate it, but it's either kills them or is very close.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, and we have seen weird stuff. Like I played like a nature-focused opener with Guff because Guff has enough damage to kill Trigor on turn 1. So maybe it's possible. I think the problem with comps like that is they're going to fold to a lot of other stuff. But Trigor is in 1,000,001 comps right now, so like it kind of works right now. It's going to remain to be seen though whether, where this all shakes out, right? Like I think Trigor is here to stay, but is he here to stay in every comp that he's currently in? Maybe not. Only time will tell, though. It is early on, but that is an interesting insight. Maybe we'll have to try that out because I do want to try Fire Comp now with the new patch. And you're right that the AoE, normally the stronger part of Geddon, is kind of a downside when you're up against all the Trigor decks. Then let's see, Xyrella got some changes. So Xyrella, their Atonement went from dealing 15 damage to dealing 20 damage. That is not going to make a big difference. Really, nobody played Atonement, or nobody used Atonement on Xyrella. Maybe in some weird PvE stuff. I don't know about that, personally. And then her Robes of Purity equipment, which is also related to that skill, makes it so instead of Atonement requiring 5 less healing to upgrade, it's 10 less. Just not really relevant, right? Let's see. Other characters, Cariel got some buffs, but really just an extra attack, a little bit more HP when she gets the death blow, and some more attack when she is taunted. So instead of +8 attack, +12 attack while taunted. Cool, but
it's a lot, yeah.
Not enough to be making her see the kind of play, like not
Except
just
for
yeah.
Vandar. We got some Vandar technology
Oh
here.
yeah, I guess that's kind of true, huh?
Mhm. Plus, it's another additional 5 attack basically on her because of that. Her flat +1 attack and then another +4 attack. And now Vandar says everyone with taunt gets to
Yeah,
punch.
and he buffs those characters, right? So that's a good point as well. Okay, yeah. So yeah, Cariel, you're right, there is some synergy there with I didn't even think about the synergy with Vandar, but Vandar has been pretty cool. I tried out like a Vandar comp that it used Kazakus to send in that 2020 golem
That's what
right
I was gonna
away.
say. Does Kazakus work with if it was like Kazakus, Cariel, Vandar, whatever you make it
Yeah,
20?
maybe just force all your dudes to, because it's a lot of damage, right? Like if you're running the taunt equipment on Vandar, he starts at 12. He gets, I think he starts at 12. You can give him more attack with Kazakus with the buff, so it's another 4. And then you can summon a golem with Kazakus that will get force pushed in, so it's like 24 or something, or 25 damage, plus Vandar's damage, plus this as well. And the speed works out, right? Like you can get Cariel there faster than both Kazakus and Vandar with their taunt. So that's pretty cool.
It's
Maybe
like 60 red damage or something like
it's
that.
a lot of damage. Yeah, like I mean that could kill some stuff. So maybe it's not as bad as it looked on the surface. Uther got some buffs. Basically, his equipment gives Hammer of Justice 2 more damage. Fine. Avenging Wrath equipment now makes it deal 8 more instead of 4 more. Avenging
That's a
Wrath,
lot.
it's a lot of damage, but Avenging Wrath was never really that good to begin with. And then Blessing of Protection, they changed it. So instead of restoring 10 health to a friendly and giving them taunt, now it's 14 health to a friendly. So, I mean, I'll take it, right? Like, Uther buffs, yay. And I was actually playing a build with Uther that was kind of working as like a Trigor counter with like Valera and Zyrella, and it was cool. But I don't think these are the changes Uther needed to really stand out and see a lot more play. But we'll have to see. But he felt a bit more inconsequential. Same with Garrosh. Garrosh literally got like a random extra attack for some reason, and his battle Orcish Banner, which made the equipment, which made the battle shout, restore 10 health to your orcs. Now it restores 15. Again, kind of inconsequential.
I actually think that equipment is maybe better than people think. I was making a brief argument for it on my stream when I was looking at it.
Really?
I think it when you look at some of the other changes and the way that Galvangar got buffed is that we'll see in a second too, and we just got some more Orcish. I mean, Galvangar got buffed and they were already not seeing as much play as I think they should have seen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Garrosh now actually gets to just fit the identity of the orc comp a little bit better, instead of like Garrosh was basically only seeing play because of the stupid like Tusk of Manaroth or whatever we
Yeah.
did like
A lot of
bazillion
HP.
your thing. But he just came out there and all he did was just gain health and he just didn't do anything and he was just useless. Now Garrosh actually gets to come sliding off of the bench like this weird like semi sniper that has this like quick AoE heal, and I don't know if we got confirmation before, but I hopefully they attack and then heal with the battle shout.
It heals
You know,
first. I
sucks.
equipped the equipment just to
Oof.
check, and it
That's
puts
lame.
the heal text first on the ability before.
That's
and then-
unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's flavorfully, it makes sense. You like scream and everyone gets happy, and then you punch something, but not the other way around. So it makes sense. But I think in terms of like the identity for this character, I think it's almost like a weird. It's kind of like a red orc cookie that you get to play off of the bench. That can like when you're in a sticky spot, as soon as you lose your first orc, you just get to go summon a guy that just quickly with no slows on me, 3 speed, heal for 30 plus, and just punch something randomly with various other stats with other orc attacking stats. I think it actually makes Garrosh more interesting and more playable in a thematically similar concept to the deck that they should be in and are in already.
Yeah.
But that's my
And
orc pitch.
Garrosh wasn't seeing a ton of play, right, because of Frost and everything. And I talked with Izzy's today, actually, and he was seeing some success with like a full orc comp.
Yeah.
I tried it out. It didn't work super duper well for me, but I was probably also playing it pretty wrong, I think. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see the extra attack. Maybe it'll help. I do agree thematically, the health thing kind of makes sense, and overall, really not bothered by any of these buffs, right? In terms of other ones that were a little bit inconsequential, Wrathion got some extra stats, so he got 6 more HP. They changed his first attack, so if attack an enemy next turn, they must use a different ability or take 20. Now they take 25 from that. And they also upgraded the tail swipe equipment, so now it also applies bleed 10. This is also because of a change that they did to bleed, which was rather interesting. So they changed, and this is relevant for all of the bleed abilities, they changed how bleed works in Mercenaries. So now instead of an individual character applying a bleed and that bleed being instantly removed by any healing, now the bleeds are kind of stacked together, but they no longer deal crit damage, right? So if you cookie bleed for 5, you're not going to be hitting a red for 10 with it at end of turn. So that was kind of a nerf to bleed, but they kind of did a little bit of a buff to it as well, where your bleeds stack now, and instead of any healing removing the bleed, whatever you heal for will reduce the bleed. But you need to actually, if you get bleeded for 10 and you heal for 5, you're still going to be bleeding for 5 every turn. I'm not the biggest fan in the world of this change. I think it made sense for bleeds to crit and to be remembered by, but I can see this being a needed logistical change if they're planning on implementing a lot more bleeds and stuff in the future. I think it can get kind of confusing, remembering what character has what bleed from who and if it's critting, and that does get to be a little messy and hard to keep track of. So I can kind of understand it for that reason if they want to implement a lot more bleed stuff. And I mean, a lot of the characters they buffed, some of them are focused around bleed. Like Mullahoo did mention Galvangar, which is one of the buffs that was actually, pretty substantial. Galvangar was already a great character. He already had a lot of good stuff going for him. And now he has extra stats. We talked about before, Galvangar was one of those characters that felt like you really needed to max him so he wasn't super squishy, because he only had like 60, I think he had 66 unmaxed HP. Now at max, he has 79, up from 71 at max before. So that's like a free cookie buff, just like boom. He was already great, and that is going to help shore up one of his only weaknesses. They did also buff his first skill, so now it applies bleed 12 instead of bleed 8 and to adjacent enemies if they have not acted this turn. That seems like they upped the bleed on a lot of characters, it seems, and I think that's just compensating for the fact that it's losing crit damage, because right before, if you were bleeding 8 to a blue, it's actually critting for 16, whereas now it'll only be 12, but it'll be 12 to everything. So kind of helps balance it out. And they also changed his equipment. Fatal Strike also applying bleed 5, now it applies bleed 10. So upping the numbers for bleed to kind of compensate for the change. I really like this change to Galvangar. He was good before, now he's better, and I think he's going to see a lot more play.
Yeah, I hope more orc things. People are already making a relatively strong case for orcs being a decent counter to some of the frost stuff, and now with Varden a little bit worse, orcs arguably get better because you might be able to actually focus the Varden and not feel horrible about it. But with regards to the bleed stuff, I think there's something pretty sweet about bleeds now, in that I think the way that these changes were implemented, I didn't even think about what, like you were saying, is that the bleeds could come from like unique different sources, and it's like, why am I bleeding on this arm from that guy, and that one crits and that one doesn't, and like the bleed is on me. It has nothing I don't know where this came from really in certain sense. Just let it do just flat bleed damage. But so I think something about the way that this works, the new changes now actually soft buff AoE bleeds, but soft nerf
Single
target bleeds, because now things, and which is Galvangar, who has an example of someone that can just go triple apply a bleed, or like a cookie, right? Where before you were kind of saying, when I'm going to AoE bleed you, I'm going to assume that most of these won't crit, because you're going to, on average, have a diverse lineup that I'm against, or that I'm not against like a triple dream blue. Like you're not going to be critting 2-3 times. If anything, you'll only be critting kind of once.
Yeah.
So now if they increase the damage on all of your bleeds, you're getting basically a bigger DPS increase on who you wouldn't have crit. And instead of the ones that could go all on one Merc, those would be able to crit and go crazy because you'd focus them on the right person. Now they don't crit anymore, and now a single little heal that just sneezes on it doesn't just wipe 50 points of bleed. So there's some interesting little just like power phenomenon dynamics that come out with some of these changes, but also kind of again feels like this almost like immersion lore based continuity smoothing out, which I think is all things considered a good sign for just the health of the format moving forward.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
and
agree.
another thing also I just remembered with bleed, and speaking of Trigor too, is if your hero bleeds at the end of turn, it's technically damage to themselves. So if you
Mhm.
bleed the other two enemies, the Trigor, because now it can hit more than once, will technically attack both of its allies too. So I just
Ooh,
thought of
you love
that
to see it. You love
yeah,
to
so
see it.
bleed actually might be good against Trigors because he'll start hitting his own allies then.
Does
Mm-hmm.
that work that way?
Yeah. So
Trigger
because
does some stupid
bleed,
stuff.
yeah, so like if a cookie bleeds the enemy team and the
Mhm.
Trigor's ability didn't go off, at least before,
Mm.
um actually it won't matter now because it hits endless when anything's hit. Bleed counts as damage to self.
Mhm.
So if you have a bleed at the end turn, say Galvangar puts a bleed on someone, just say like an Anduin or whatever. Anduin then at the end of turn will take damage, and he's doing, say, that damage to himself. The Trigor's ability is still on because the bleed happens before the finish of the turn, since it's end of turn. So what happens is the Anduin takes the damage, the Trigor then procs off the Anduin, targeting himself, and then the Trigor hits the Anduin.
So you just
Will this
really?
now go infinite? And you just kill
Uh,
all your own team?
well, it won't be infinite because it's every time it procs, but if you have two bleeds on someone, the Trigor will hit them twice at the end of the turn then.
But if you have,
I'm pretty sure.
because it's whenever adjacent people take damage, right?
But
So
it's
if I
Yeah.
have a
and
bleed, I punch myself, my bleed triggers, Trigor shoots me. Wouldn't Trigor
Mhm.
then say, look, that guy that Trigor just shot took damage because
Wait,
it's
would
my
Trigor
ally,
hit
and then shoot it
himself?
again?
I
Would
don't.
Trigor hit
Trigor
himself
can't
though?
hit himself because it's only adjacent
Well,
whenever
I,
it's an
if
adjacent
he
ally.
if he hits your adjacent ally, then
Right.
he's
So
the
he's
one.
gonna shoot.
he would shoot himself, or no, he would shoot the ally because the ally's the one damaging. I don't think I thought it didn't proc because of timing, right? Like I thought. My understanding is bleed happens at end of turn, and I think because it's end of turn, the
No, he
No,
definitely
he
used to kill
does.
himself with. He would
Yeah,
shoot your allies with cookie bleed before. That
I
was how it worked
remember
before.
with Mullahoo who
huh,
won one game on stream with Scabs because of the bleed on the enemy, and then he
Hmm.
ended up Cookie killed itself because of the Trigor.
Yeah.
really? I've
Yeah, so
never seen that come up yet.
I need
And
to
so
see the
now I don't know.
interaction now though, because it can
Yeah.
proc multiple times. If your Trigor say you have an ally next to you and the ally has bleed on it, the ally takes damage from itself. The Trigor hits it. But
Yeah,
then because Trigor's ability is still on and Trigor hit that ally, will then Trigor hit himself because the ally took damage?
and it took the damage
I
from
think
Trigor.
so.
I
I
need
kind
to
of think it
try.
should.
It
I need
should,
to, yeah.
like in theory it should work that way. I thought I thought I had a game before where I got a bleed off and it didn't trigger the Trigor at end of turn.
Well, before it used to be only one trigger, and so if you had already triggered it,
No, I mean
then it
post
wouldn't trigger
patch.
again. But oh, okay.
I think
Oh,
So
so
maybe
unless they changed it, because that's how it was before.
they might have changed it because that seems like it would be. I mean, it would be a good counter to Trigor. I mean, we could test
bleed.
it if you want to see. Like, I'm really
I can, yeah, I'll hop
curious.
in real quick on my phone if you want to test it.
Yeah, and I'll do the same, and we can see just like if
Yeah, I'll
it
make.
actually works that way. Because like, I mean, it would make sense, and it sounds like it did work that way before. I can't remember if I know I did some multi bleeds, and I swear I had one occasion where I was like, oh, it didn't trigger the Trigor because it was like end of turn. So they might have changed
Yeah, I'll
that.
throw. Yeah, I just threw comp with Trigor in it real quick. So just let me know when you're in, because honestly, that could be a very, that could be a really big interaction, especially if
bleeds
the
being good
Trigor hits
against Trigor.
himself.
Yeah.
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 Well, we might as well, since we're already talking about talking about Trigor, we might as well go into what actually changed about him, right? Because he's
Yes.
probably one of, if not the most consequential changes, right? That's had an impact. So Trigor, his frenzied attack, went from becoming attack an enemy. If this took damage this turn, deal 12 damage to a random adjacent enemy. Now it deals 16 to a random adjacent. That's not the part that really matters. Backlash is the skill that really changed everything. And so with Backlash, it went from the next time an enemy damages an adjacent ally, gain +5 attack and deal this Merc's attack damage to them. Now it reads, gain +5 attack, so the attack gain is no longer conditional, and each time an enemy damages an adjacent ally this turn, deal this Merc's attack damage to them. That is such an insane change, and I think this was kind of...
Once every time.
Yeah.
Every time your adjacent allies take damage, Trigor shoots him as his little scorpion laser tail.
Yeah, and you can... The big thing about this is you can proc the damage yourself by swinging into stuff, or making a taunt and forcing your opponent to swing into it. And this isn't just swinging, it's just damage. So this really hurts AoEs, and this is why we were talking earlier about how Lotheb, or not Lotheb, Localar, different logos.
Lotheb Mercenary win.
Yeah, we got a diamond one, right? So Lotheb Mercenaries confirmed, maybe? We'll see. But, Localar becomes very risky versus Trigor, actually. Like it's really quite interesting that, because if you start hitting the sides of that Trigor a few times, like your Localar is not going to live. Like, especially if you
essentially can never cast an AoE ability ever. But like now they have Trigor has basically become a weird version of Localar, where Localar was like, all right, you can't go fast. Trigor says you can't AoE. If you AoE, you lose the game. You just can't. You can't do it. You have to shoot me.
Yeah, and
that's a tall ask.
Okay, so it looks like it does not trigger the Trigor anymore with the bleeds at end of turn.
So they did change it.
Count as damage from the bad guys now.
I think that is a sensible change. Because otherwise you would literally be killing your own boards a lot of the time with the bleeds and stuff. But
I was ready to flavorfully back it up that like it smells blood like on your own dudes, and he just freaks out and he's like, dude, you're bleeding. Oh, then he tries to shoot it and he slaps himself in the face because he's like one head like beats the other head for accidentally jumping too quickly. So I was ready, Blizzard. I was ready to go to for you,
but no, what a crazy change, and it's not coincidence, right? That the year of the Hydra's coming in and they just slapped like the most absurd buff we've ever. I mean, this to me, this is Grom Slam level. This is like, like the amount of Trigor went from 0 to like 100 real fast, and it's a little silly. But so far I've been enjoying it, and
I mean, we've been begging for better protectors. And they buffed 2 protectors like hardcore.
No, it's true, and it's. I like these buffs overall. It really is interesting, especially in the mirrors. You have to really start thinking about what is damaging what and how it's going to trigger Trigor, and how Trigor is going to hit. Trigors hit each other because Trigor damages, what's next to Trigor, and then that hits the Trigor, and then there's just, they do need to speed up the animation on it a little bit, I think, because if you have Trigor versus Localar and something dies, those animations take so long, it burns through most of your rope during the swap-in phase. So they're going to have to speed up Trigor Localar stuff a little bit, but it hasn't been like a big problem, but he's showing up everywhere. Kind of a related thing this has led to is Trigor's a beast. So Return of Beasts, as Rexar and Muckla have some great synergy here. Muckla actually got some buffs too, and some pretty sweet ones, I might add. So they made Dinner Time, which is his taunt ability, 1 speed instead of 2. That's a great buff. Really like seeing that. Fast taunts just make a lot of sense for what taunt is trying to do. And then they changed both of his banana equipments. So his additional health from bananas, now they're granting +5 instead of +4. And the radioactive bananas, the attack bananas, are now giving an additional +4 attack instead of +2. So that's +5, +1, or +1, +6. That's huge. I mean, I saw our resident Muckla main, Surjak, trying out the plus attack one. And let me tell you, +6, +1 when you're spreading out 5 of those bananas, like that's a lot.
Plus 1, I think, right? But still a ton.
No, it's plus. Oh yeah, you're right. It's because it's plus 4. So yeah, plus 5. So plus 5, plus 1. That's nuts. I mean, I got smacked down by a Tyrion that was like 50 attack or something after like 2 turns with bananas. Like that's crazy. So this is cool. I mean, I thought Mucklow's equipment were already all right, but I think this is a good way to promote more variety in his kind of skill set, and I was happy to see it. Like, there have been fringe cases, and we've seen it show up on a bunch on King of the Hill, where the banana buffing can be good because it's a lot of health, and I like that they are kind of giving that option to the radioactive bananas as well. So, and this makes Beast Comp a pretty viable opener because you're getting that additional stats from Rexar. You're getting the taunt to kind of double up on things that can be bumped into to trigger your Trigor. And then this also leads into this kind of indirectly buffs Arcane with Longjin, and we actually got Arcane character buffs on top of that.
Arcane Beast's got some juice.
Yeah, it's pretty huge. Do you want to talk about the Arcane stuff, WizardBeast? Because I know you've been trying it out probably the most out of any of us.
Yeah, I've been loving the Arcane buffs. So the biggest ones is for Tronde with her second ability, which was old deal 8 damage to 2 random enemies. Now is deal 12 damage to random enemies. So right there, it's plus 4 damage to each. And if any die, repeat this.
Yeah.
Now, right there is the key word,
So
like in the key phrase. So
Green
that
rag.
it's been insane combos, especially if the Longjin
Yeah.
after a Beast Comp put that down, and if that's hitting for 30 and then he kills something and then repeats and does like another 30 to 2 people, it can board wipe. So that's been crazy. But then also I'm really liking this equipment. So the old equipment was for Arcane Shot, the first ability, where it would just be shoot someone and I think deal 14 damage. And with this it deals 5 more. Now it's Arcane Shot deals 15 more damage if the enemy has already acted.
That's huge.
So yeah, I've been loving this equipment too. I've also been playing Arcane as an opener with Millhouse, Tronde, and Longjin. And having that to a blue, you're doing 60 damage turn 1 because almost all other blues are going before 7 speed.
True.
So you're doing literally 60 damage turn 1 just with Tronde. And then Millhouse, also we talked about the buff earlier, has plus 1 more damage on the equipment for Arcane Explosion, so it's plus 5 overall. So that's been pretty good. And then just Longjin has just always been a great Arcane character. So having Tronde really a good solid green Arcane now, where before, she was like decent with Arcane. You had like the combo with the third spell able to double. Now Tronde is not just for the double. She can just do massive combos herself and wipe boards. So having this equipment by itself, just the massive burst on the first shot is great, or the second equipment, which is another 4 damage on your multi-shot where you hit 2 people. So then it would become deal 16 damage to 2 random enemies and repeat.
That's what I've been using. It's really strong.
Does the Alun's Charm equipment that gives the like Tavish bonus damage thing, does that count as a second instance of damage? So if you Millhouse and give the plus 3 arcane damage, do you get plus 6 from it? Or does it stack it onto the original damage and it does like 29?
Stacks onto their original damage.
Okay, so it's basically aim shot, right? Like it just turns arcane shot into aim shot from Tavish, basically. Okay.
Yeah, but it's nice because at least it's it's a slow ability already. It's at 7 speed.
Oh yeah, it's fast.
So it procs.
Still shoots Jaina.
Yeah. No, I've actually beat Full Frost Opener with Arcane.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this character's nuts against Full Frost.
Yeah, because with Longjin, and the Longjin, I run the nature resistance equipment and the swap on turn 1. So if you end up going against any openers that can kill a blue or green right away, you can at least play mind games. So even against certain comps like that, I'm not instant losing. So it's actually Arcane's been pretty sweet for me. I've so far, I'd say over probably 60% win rate with it so far.
Yeah,
it's been doing really well for me.
I really like the Arcane. Arcane, this Tyrande buff it's huge for particularly, now we have the possibility of an Arcane opener, but it really buffs up both beast and dragon builds. And I mean, I've been trying Trigor with like dragon openers because, again, Longjin's equipment, it dragons or beasts, so you can afford to mix and match there, and it's totally fine. And it's been really, really good in both. Like, I have had games that Tyrande has completely soloed. I mean, not soloed, like duoed with Longjin. And another sick combo with her is if you're using Cookie on the bench, you can make it more likely that you're going to re-proc your multi-shot by doing a fish, because if you have the buff on the damage, you're dealing over 15 damage. So, and then that's not even accounting for additional arcane damage from the Longjin. So it gets really nuts really fast. Like, I've had it be where it was dealing like 25 or 28 damage. And so boom, if you're hitting a blue, that's over 50 damage. And so that kills a bunch of blues. And if everything's out of range, you still have a chance because you can just give yourself a cookie fish. The odds actually aren't that bad. Boom. And then usually if you get that proc, one of the things left will be weak enough to where it dies again. I've dealt over 100 damage in a turn and like wiped like full boards with this. They really just like lifted Arcane right out of the gutter. It's like Tyrande went from being almost unplayable to one of the better greens that's seeing play right now in the meta in the right comp. Like it really, this is the kind of buff that I like to see. Like it took a character who had cool ideas and potentially cool synergy, but just wasn't quite there. And it just cranked up that power enough to where now this character has a use. Like it's
great for free to play.
Oh yeah,
because it's just a character that doesn't suck to play when you start the game. Like you get a death blow, you go again. You have to think about their ability, and it does more damage. Like a brand new player, like Tyrande's actually fun. Like Millhouse Tyrande is probably fun as heck to start any game with now. Like every new Mercenaries player should probably start with those.
Yeah, and it's probably way better for PvE now, right? Like I chucked mine right in that training hall as soon as I saw this patch on the EU. I was like, all right, throwing her in because I wasn't going to level her before, but now it's like, and it's just, this is a great change. I think this is the kind of change I would like to see for some other underused and undersupported tribes. Like, I was a little disappointed we didn't see any Murloc or Demon action, but they could be wanting to take a more cautionary approach if we're going to already be getting characters relevant to those tribes in the next big drop, particularly Murlocs, I think is what a lot of us are expecting, given the theme of the new expansion. So I could see why they want to wait, but I would like to see, like, this is the kind of change that makes me really excited to play the game. And it literally, between the Trigor change, like, just those two characters on their own have completely had a big impact on the meta because of how powerful they are and how well they line up against some, like, previously established threats in the meta.
For sure.
And I was never expecting this many buffs, right? This list went like on and on and on that I never expected. And this is great. I would literally, like I said, I would rather have stuff like this happen and then get Mercenaries less frequently. Like after just talking about these buffs and talking about that, we said now we're only getting Mercs every couple of months, or you get like one Merc for an event halfway through and then like 15 Mercs at once or whatever. As long as we get like waves of mini changes or just like adjustments or shifts of color identity and stuff like that, that's fine. Again, there are already arguably too many things to try, and you have to take time to level it up to even try it if you want to. That takes plenty of time. I honestly think that these are all pretty good steps in the right direction, and like the biggest steps we've seen so far.
Definitely. It definitely, like, that was one of the key points to me that will kind of make or break this decision is, will we get more regular stuff like this? Because I think if we do, and it doesn't even need to be super often, but like, maybe once or twice in a patch cycle, or not patch cycle, but in that time between the big Mercs drops, I think that could be perfect. Like if things start getting a little bit too stale or one thing just becomes clearly too dominant, they can change some stuff up. And a lot of the times they could probably do that without going right to nerfing something, which always does create some feel bads for some percentage of the player base, right? Because nobody likes their favorite thing getting nerfed, right? And this is kind
Again,
of
when these cards have multiple spells, right? Like you can take Valera and be like, all right, unnatural smoke, everyone gets your speed by 2, but the ambush equipment deals 6,000 damage when you get a death blow with it. Isn't that cool? Like they can literally change, they can nerf one part of it, buff another part, and say, look, we didn't nerf it. Like we don't have to pay you back anything. And in standard, there's one number. Yeah, it's right, exactly. It's a rework. We don't owe, but then that also lets you get around the excess coins problem, because that's what we kept saying was like, guys, what the heck? They can't nerf anything because they have to pay us back for it, quote unquote. And arguably way more mercenaries, because the time and energy and money spent is way more than standard, in my opinion. So they almost couldn't nerf things, but just kidding. Of course they can. They can just move the dial on any character at any moment in many different directions. That like dimensionality of like 3-4 dimensions on these characters, just standard cards, battlegrounds units just don't have. So again, they've made themselves, they've created a system with the hopium laced into its DNA. Like it is just a matter of, can they convert? And again, they are beginning to.
Yeah, we're definitely getting somewhere with it. Quickly cover just these last few characters, and then we'll start to wrap up here. The other characters that got some buffs, we got pirates actually got buffs. We got a buff that I've been asking for forever with Edwin. So they finally made it. So Edwin no longer has Eudora anti-synergy. Now his speed up pirates equipment, now it speeds up all other pirates. So it doesn't speed up himself. I kind of wish it did. Probably be overpowered, but Edwin deserves it because he's really bad. But now it's your other pirates are 4 speed faster, not adjacent. That's really big. Now you can run him with Eudora. He got some other changes as well, where Assassin's Blade now gives you an additional 5 health if the enemy hasn't acted yet, and then you attack it again. So it's 10 instead of 5. Not bad. They got rid of one of the cooldown on Kingpin's Bounty. Still don't think that ability is great, but I'd much rather have it at 1 speed than 2. They also buffed one of his other equipment, so now Kingpin's Bounty restores 15 health and affects all friendlies instead of 10. So most of those are pretty small buffs, but I do like the change on Assassin's Blade, and the big thing is no more Eudora anti-synergy. But the real interesting pirate, and he goes hand in hand with Edwin, is Sneed. And for anyone who's followed some of the YouTube stuff I've done, I covered a build that Finney made as kind of an anti-frost build, and it was Edwin, Sneed, and Galvangar. All 3 of these characters got buffed. Ooh, and the Sneed's buff was actually pretty consequential. Sneed's got an extra 2 base attack, so from 7 to 9. His attack was pitiful before. Now,
7?
Yeah, it was really bad. That was max, by the way. Now it's 9. But that's not where it stops. So his active saw ability went from giving +6 attack for 2 turns, attack a random enemy. Now it gives +9 attack for 2 turns. Still not his best attack, but the reason it's so good is one of his equipments, which also got buffed, extra blades. Before, it made Sneed start with active blade active for 1 turn. Now, he starts with it active, but it's for 2 turns. So that is huge, because now your Sneed base attack with that equipment, he's coming in at 18. And then if you add Galvangar on top of that for another 5, that's 23. And Sneed's is cleaving with his first attack because active saw is active. So that's like 46 damage on a green, and it hits everything. Like that's pretty crazy. And it lasts for a whole extra turn, so you're not just getting one big attack in with Sneeds on the first turn. And this is fast, by the way. This is 2 speed because of Edwin. So you can cleave Valera, Belinda, kill the elemental, absolutely maim their units. Like, this was already good against the Frost Opener. Now it's insane against the Frost Opener. So
no, I like that.
I was really happy to see these changes. He did get one more buff for the bleed equipment. Now gives 10 bleed instead of 5. Go with the bleed changes, but you're probably not going to be running that because extra blades is just so much better. However, because of Trigor, this comp is probably a bit worse now because you don't want to be dealing that cleave damage at 2 speed. But against
2 speed.
Yeah, well, it's 2 speed with Edwin sped up. With Edwin speeding it up, normally it's 6. Edwin speeds it to 2, which is what enables you to beat the Frost Valera comps. However, 2 is not faster than 1, so Trigor still outspeeds it. So probably not good into Trigor comps because you're opening double green and you're trying to hit stuff and cleave, and not good against Trigor. But if Frost Valera starts popping back up as a very dominant comp, I guarantee you this will be a prevalent counter because I tried it out and it's sweet. Sneeds deals way more damage than he dealt before, and the fact that he's not useless after turn 1 is really big. Like, that was one of the biggest weaknesses of this comp, was that you would use your Sneeds combo on turn 1, and then the next turn he wasn't doing very much and lost a bunch of attack. He couldn't cleave again. Now he's a lot better. So really like that change. What's her face? Vanessa got a little bit better too, but probably not good enough to see play. She got 3 more attack. Nice to see. Now when she combo steals attack, she steals before hitting. Cool buff. Probably should have been like that from the beginning, but we'll take those. And then she got an equipment change, so it allows her to keep more attack after using makeshift weaponry. Before it was 5, now it's 10. Probably not enough for her to see play, but I'm still happy to see Vanessa got some kind of buff because she was probably the most memed on Merc out there. And maybe there's something you can do with her now. We just haven't tried it out yet. But I believe that's everything. The last one we didn't talk about was Gul'dan, but Gul'dan was also kind of inconsequential for the most part. We do see them
for demons now, basically.
Yeah,
they got replaced by Drekthar in Orcs, and now you should be playing Gul'dan in your demons deck, not your Orcs deck. That's basically the TLDR of the Gul'dan change.
Yeah, because they made Reign of Destruction 0 cooldown, but that ability was kind of unused most of the time in PvP so far. And then the Staff of Chaos equipment, after an Orc dies, gain the +4 Fel. Now it's after Orc or Demon dies, gain the +4 Fel. Cool change. Like to see it. Maybe it'll help Fel. Probably not enough to really see significant play. That is all of the balance changes, though, and all that stuff. We
talked about Varian. That was the other.
Oh, yes.
You loosely said them. That's kind of the biggest other one, is that Varian
that's a big
got
one.
Changed to have two big ones. So we'll end with that one essentially. So Varian we were saying that Local R basically didn't get nerfed. Valera didn't get nerfed. But partially because Trigor and Varian were kind of the other fill-ins of this triangle, of the anti-green triangle, where it's like Local R, Varian, and Trigor. Now, Varian has the anti-attack retaliation ability, where whenever somebody attacks, retaliation triggers from Varian, and he gains a bunch of stats and punches them back. Before, that was not that great because you took a lot of retaliation damage. You didn't really gain health when you did this, so you just took a ton of damage and you just died. It was used as a hot second counter to Valera, but it wasn't really good enough. You could still play around it. Valera was just way better, and the rest of the humans comp wasn't good. So now retaliation got a lot better, a lot more stats on that rework for that ability for Varian, so it's just strictly better. Way bigger numbers. You get like +7, +12 or something insane.
Yeah, it's and the equipment, so it depends.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So now there was an argument to use like the Charlemagne equipment on Varian because it was just more flat base attack and it was basically better than using retaliation. Now you have a real decision. If you're going to be spamming retaliation, now there's a retaliation equipment that's very good. But the extra big thing is that now the heroic leap buffs permanently speeds up all of your humans on your active party and on your bench. And that's the nutty thing that almost single-handedly opens up humans to be able to be a 4, 5, 6 humans comp that can bleed over into the bench. You've got your Natalie's somewhere in there, maybe your Anduins, your
Rogers
got buffed, your Rogers is definitely Tyrion. So all those guys start to get worked into the mix a little bit better, and that's definitely one of the other big changes that any humans players you can now's your time to give it a shot and shine.
Yeah, so in terms of exact numbers, retaliation went from just gaining +5 attack, now it gains +5 attack and health base. And if you are running the War Banner equipment, now it's giving you an additional +2, +10. So that turns into +7, +15. Yeah, so that's a lot of stats. And you're going to be just absolutely smacking. I mean, Valera's just done. Like, if she goes off and you play into this, like, and if you do want to try and counter it with like Grom or something, even that, it's still a flip because it's 2 speed. But yeah, the heroic leap is pretty big for enabling more human comps. I tried a human comp out a while ago, and it actually wasn't that bad. So a change like this is nice. And he did have a minor change to his first skill, where the death blow gave 12 attack to your humans. Now it gives 15. small, but also helps. Happy to see this. Humans, we have a lot of them, but they don't have a ton of units that care about the tribe. Varian's one of the only ones, so it's nice to see him get a bit of a buff. So maybe you can try to go for that human comp a little bit more. So for real this time, that is the last of the buffs here. Did we talk about? I think we talked about Scabs briefly. Scabs got a bit stronger too.
At the top, yeah.
Yeah.
Scabs got so many numbers, and I was already like meme advocating for Scabs as being like better than people were giving him credit for.
Yeah.
And now he does so much damage. I would definitely suggest giving Scabs a shot with Tyrion if you can find a spot for it.
Yeah, and WizardBeast was actually running him on the Arcane comp as a bench unit, and I'll be honest, it surprised me.
Yeah.
It's a lot of damage, and he has that stealth like Valyria, so he can kind of protect himself for the next turn. And so it's another character that was just total utter trash before, and he got extra stats. He got an additional 4 HP and 2 attack, so that can matter. So nice to see it again. Just love seeing buffs to these characters who are pretty much unplayable. Obviously, not every buff is going to make every one of these characters good or playable, but I think it had at least a good enough impact to shake things up a bit, which I'm definitely a fan of. Because if you're not going to be dropping new Mercs regularly to shake things up, this is a good way to prevent things getting overly stale if one strategy ends up dominating, which we were kind of in a position like that. I don't think it was the worst it's ever been in the game, but I think Frost was by far the most dominant comp in terms of just raw power and play, like how many people were playing it. Like there were ways you could counter it, but I think since the patch, I've run into significantly less Frost. Only time will tell if that remains to be the case. But they did say it's possible we could be getting more regular changes in the future, which is something I think we're all in favor of. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for our meta talk stuff. One thing I do want to mention before we get to our end question and sign off here is they did also mention, and this is at the top of like everyone's list and stuff, right? They finally talked about excess coins in a very small way. So I did want to mention that. They said later this year with the endgame PvE stuff, it sounds like it's going to be kind of directly integrated with that. But they said the intent with extra coins currently is to use them for this endgame PvE stuff to power up your already maxed characters in some way. They were very vague about it. They didn't specify a lot, but from what they said and how they said it, it sounds like we're going to be able to use our coins in some way to juice up our already maxed out characters, and it sounds like it's going to be purely focused around the PvE stuff, as obviously if you did that in PvP, it would probably get kind of pay to win, right? If you could just juice up your character with my 10,000 Anduin coins and whatnot, or whatever it is, right?
I mean, it could be a second level of getting maxed, and that could be a PvP thing, but no, I'm pretty sure it's going to be something along the lines of like you can buy a treasure with bonus coins to start a run.
Or upgrade a treasure, like make it more powerful in the run, or I think that's kind of the direction.
A consumable within a PvE content. Like it's going to be like a flask. Like you buy a flask and then you can use it for the next 5 fights. It gives you 20 attack, like that kind of stuff. Which
something
will
like
ultimately not really matter that much, thankfully, in a certain sense. But if it is tied to any kind of leaderboard, if it's tied to any kind of like raid gear or a second level of maxing or level 40 or whatever it is, then all of a sudden now that means something, and the grinders will be paid for that. So we'll see. We truly know nothing about that new endgame PvE stuff other than that it is theoretically on the way.
Yeah, so it was nice to see him mention it, that it is coming. I mean, I think we all would have probably preferred some kind of conversion system, but it probably wasn't really very realistic given that
we'll take the task change for now, the mysterious change.
Yeah, we'll take one thing at a time, and the big thing is I'm not going to think too hard on it until we actually get more information, because if you think about it, right, if that is what the excess coins are going to be used for, you can't have coins be your reward for this endgame PvE, right? Because it's not a satisfying gameplay loop. Like you're not going to do the endgame content to get coins so you can keep doing buffing up your characters to do the content to get coins. like there's no point, right? Like they need to, in my opinion, make endgame PvE. They need to give us something that's not coins, and I don't know what that's going to be. We've talked about skins, that you could do like a cool skin, but I think they might do that, but I think they've got to come up with some other thing that they want to make us obtain behind that, or some goal that is just not coins related, because eventually you're going to make it where the excess coin problem isn't actually fixed if all you're spending it on is stuff in this bounty to get more coins, because eventually you're going to have all your stuff and you don't need the more coins, and that kind of defeats the purpose of endgame PvE, right? Because you want the end game to be the thing you're working towards, to use those max characters, right? So I think I don't know what that's going to be, and I'm sure we'll speculate on it in other episodes in the future and stuff, but it sounds like it's still a ways off. We do know it's happening sometime later this year, and I'd imagine that will be something they throw in with one of the big Mercs patches. So it could happen in the 0.4 patch, in a month and a half, 2 months from now. Could happen in the next one. We'll have to wait and see. I did want to mention that because I know excess coins are at the top of everyone's list as one of the big things. So didn't want to forget about that, because we did get some news, but not really enough to say anything super definitively on it until we find more information about the system and more information about what endgame PvE actually is going to be, right? But we are going to wrap it up there for this week. End question, kind of relevant to something that briefly mentioned at the beginning of the show. So we had the task change for Mysterious Stranger, and as we said, this is a huge change, very beneficial change, and we're all very happy that this is the direction they decided to go with it. But they did mention they are going to be doing something else in the future to also change tasks in another way. And so I'm curious, what do we each think is something they might do or they might want to do with tasks that, they haven't talked about or haven't implemented yet? Personally, I think it's going to be something to give play either an expansion on the task system, which I think would be good and needed. And we do know Task 19 exists in the game. It doesn't give you anything, but we've seen players early on get bugged and get past Task 18. So I think they might expand the task system, and I think it'd be fantastic if you could get closer to fully maxing a character purely off of tasks, so you don't have to go do that 1-1 farming or the individual bounty farming. I think from their perspective, they probably won't want to give it so it's all the coins you need, but even if they just made it gave us a handful more tasks, and if those tasks, especially if they gave packs as well, like the late tasks do, that could be a pretty big buff to the free-to-play economy, and would also just improve the experience of leveling your characters through doing the tasks. Because like we said before, it feels like a real game now, kind of. That was the biggest thing I noticed from this change is I'm playing the game and it feels like I'm playing an actual game rather than playing the stranger roulette. It really, it's all right, I'll go do these tasks and complete these challenges. It just feels much more organic. So I think that could be a way to add on to that and make the grinding experience just more enjoyable for the player. But what do you guys think?
I think it definitely going to expand on the tax system. Have it maybe go up to maybe 25 or something, shoot up, get more coins. And then it would be cool if at the end, kind of how they've been doing all of these event quest lines. What if this was the Mercenaries quest line, and then you get maybe they add in a 4th skin for a bunch of mercenaries in. So it's hey, you completed all 25, maybe 30 of their tasks. Last reward is, another skin for all of them. That I think would be kind of cool. Then it makes it, everyone's always wanting to do tasks, but it would just be another additional bonus. Hey, I got another 50 coins at the end or something. It's oh, I finally got the cool skin, and this shows off, hey, I finished all of their tasks for them. So I think that would be something cool, add a cosmetic on top of just more coins to help people max them faster.
That's a neat idea. And we have seen there is kind of precedent to that with how they started adding in the cosmetics to the events, right? So, I mean, if they do it in events, what's to say they might not throw an additional cosmetic in the tasks eventually, especially if they expand. And I think they probably will expand over time. the amount of skins a character has. I mean, we've seen them expand greatly in base Hearthstone and even other formats in terms of upping like the cosmetic stuff, and it would not surprise me if eventually that's the direction Mercs ends up going into.
Mm.
Yeah. The only thing I'm worried about in terms of going back and adding more skins is that I'm pretty sure most of the art tends to be done by the same artist. And so if they like get all the art at once and they aren't
Oh, fair
extras,
point.
going back and getting another piece of art for it might be a pain in the butt. But I definitely think something like I mean, Mercenaries is begging for a tangible, visible marker that says like, look, I'm the nuts in
Mhm.
some way, whether or not it's just for ego or it's just for whaling out or just for spending time or free to playing it or whatever, whether it's diamond skins for characters that don't have diamond skins, that kind of stuff. I definitely think would be a really cool way to see it. In terms of a change that I think might be kind of cool, that is kind of just other than add more tasks, is something like a win streak multiplier. And so they could actually incentivize you to go and like crank out like 3 tasks back to back to back. Now that you can have the full chain is there
Mhm.
to say, look, if you want to, you start the chain, and if you can do 3 tasks in X hours, right, or X runs or X
Mhm.
turns, then you get double the reward or something like that, right? That actually can allow you to, if you want to focus and grind it out, if you only have an hour one day, you can spend an hour and get more than, like, before you used to spend, if you had an hour, you could go look for a mysterious stranger. That would take 10 or 15 minutes, whiff, go and do it again, finally get it. That's another 10 or 15 minutes or whatever. Now I'm going to go try to do it. Okay, I finally completed it. It takes another 20 minutes. I did one task and it's an hour, and that sucks. It blows. And now you can actually just know that you have the chain going, have prepped it the week before if you wanted, and you still have the chain, but now you know that you have an hour on Wednesday or whatever, and you can just go task, get a multiplier for it, cash out, and then keep going. And it doesn't just feel like this miserable grind. So something like an incentive, almost like a gotcha-esque incentive to perform in specific moments of time that allow you to just get the grind over with in a way that doesn't just make you burn out, I think would be a pretty cool change to the task system.
Yeah, I like that idea as well. I mean, even one small thing they could do that, I mean, you wouldn't even have to add anything additional if they implemented duplicate protection on the random coins that you get from the current task. So,
Oh, yeah.
so mainly just you can't get it for
No more
max
random
mercs
coins
anymore,
like that,
right?
yeah.
Like, I'd be okay with it being random if it was giving it to me randomly from what I'm missing, right? Because then it doesn't whiff.
That'd be good.
And because it felt great, and as someone doing the free to play EU stuff right now, like tasks feel so much better there because when I'm getting those random coins, like 100% of the time they're for stuff I don't have maxed, and it's like, oh wow, this task is even better than it was before. And I think that's kind of how it should feel. So that would be a change that it would really help. It would obviously help the players who have more stuff completed. But I think, everybody who ends up sticking with Mercenaries will eventually get to a point like that, depending on how many new ones they release.
Right.
So I think it is beneficial to think about a change like that where it'd be very subtle, but it would help greatly. But now that we're getting the bigger Mercs drops all at once, your odds will be better on those new random coins. You have more stuff to get, basically. But that's going to do it for us here for episode 17 of the Fighting Pit. Before we get going here, do we want to let our viewers know where they can find each of us? Do you want to start, Mullahoo?
Sure. Yeah, actually, I have kind of an interesting update in that way because normally I was streaming during the week on Wednesday, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, depends on when it was, but those days. But since I'm working on our super secret underground layer project for the time being, I'm going to be harder to catch on stream. You can still catch me on Twitter and those kind of places. So like my DMs are open, etc. If anybody needs to ask me anything. But the podcast Twitter at the Fighting Pit or Mullahoo TTV on Twitter are the best ways. My stream will be slightly off schedule for the time being, but Twitter, as always, is the good way to do it.
Awesome. And as always, all these links will be available in the description. What about you, WizardBeast? Where can everybody find you at?
Everyone can find me on Twitter at WizardBeastOP and also at WizardBeastOP on Twitch. Kind of the same thing for this month. I just started a new job, so I'm taking a couple weeks break from streaming, but near probably the end of the month, end of month, start next month, I'm going to start streaming more and actually get a streaming schedule together. So that'll be really
Nice.
cool to start that.
Yeah, no, I definitely know how tricky it can be, even as someone who has most of their time dedicated to the content creation stuff. It is hard to nail down a stream schedule. Like I'm streaming more regularly now, but I do not have any kind of like consistent schedule yet. Hopefully, something that will come with time. But I've been streaming a lot more since the patch hit, since I've been having a lot of fun with it, a lot of new stuff to try. You can find me over on Twitch at Zombies with a Z at the end of it. Go nom nom. On YouTube, as usual, Zombies Go Nom Nom with an S. Same thing for Twitter. Might eventually get that changed if I, make it big, and Twitch lets me do that fancy name change thing. But
when not if.
yeah, right. Yeah, no, the streams have been going great. So if you want to catch some live Mercenaries action, definitely check it out there. Daily stuff on the YouTube as always. If you are watching this on YouTube, liking and subscribing, great way to help out and support the show. We will have a Discord coming soon. It's in the works, probably in the next week or two. I'll do like official announcement on the show, and we'll make it open to people. So I know a few people have been asking about that. So look forward to that. And if you're listening on our other platforms, Apple, Spotify, RSS feed, following the show or whatever that platform's equivalent is also a great way to help us out, support the show. But we do want to thank you so much for staying with us, checking out this episode. Many more exciting things to come for Mercenaries in the year of the Hydra, but that's going to do it for us for this time. We will catch you in the next one. Peace.
Goodbye, good luck.
Stay safe.